Did I ever tell you about the village of Throne Reach? It's got something of a story. Nestled on the banks of the Throne River, which used to flow through the heart of the old empire, Throne Reach is now at the very limits that the empire reaches. And like much of the old empire, a lot of this village lays in ruins. It's been over 100 years since the war that brought armies here. When the greenskin invasion to the heart of the old empire drew reinforcements up from the south from the nearby cities of once imperial cities, Ashad, Thum, Lirimer and Moraine. It was a war you could argue that the empire won, but to the people of Throne Reach, the price was dear indeed. And whereas it was once a staging post for armies that came to relieve the besieged empire, now it is a town notable only by its sizable graveyard. To the few who come here now, however, it is also known for its night market. Despite the backdrop of broken old buildings and dilapidation of the old town, in what remains of what is now just a small village, people make their lives here and continue as if all the history that befell this sorry village doesn't affect them. Mrs. Bristlesworth, for example, is a keen gardener and is currently sweeping off her steps. Edward Tillison is a carpenter and is currently loading up his wagon full of goods to take to Ashad and Thum. His son is taking a little break from loading the cart up, just across the river from the Tillisons. The blacksmith is getting some bad news. His daughter Eliza will soon pass from the plague, the 8th victim in just 2 days. Douglas Fieldman is annoyed with young Timothy for giving money to a beggar. He thinks that it will encourage that behaviour. The beggar is a woman named Margaret who comes through the village every Tuesday night for the night market. Lord Botherington is playing a role in a play which is keeping the people entertained on this night. Gillian Smythe used to be a tavern owner in Central, but high taxes there led him to close his tavern down. Now he and his son are vegetable merchants. Meanwhile, Mr. Smith puts on a foreign and exotic act. He's from the city of Moraine, but he pretends to be from further afield. He brings in delicacies from Ashad and Thum. But it's as our adventurers get close to the stage that Mr. Botherington sees them, and he comes away from the stage for a moment and asks them to meet him by the large crypt in the graveyard just before dawn. The graveyard is lined with wide walkways. The walkways lead off in many directions, but the main route through leads to the heart of the graveyard, this central square that's surrounded by 4 statues of heroes from old. 2 of the statues are from generals in the war, but the other 2 are of adventurers and are much, much older. The main path from the square takes us past some newly dug graves. The man digging the graves is Jethro Hadsworth, and he'll tell the adventurers that they're having to squeeze the graves in wherever they can. In fact, a recent outbreak of a plague has meant that he's had to remove a large number of the older graves. Outside of the crypt, Lord Botherington tells our heroes that the village has been suffering an outbreak of the plague. The victims are all buried now, although there'll soon be another one. But every time someone dies, another falls ill. Can the heroes help before nightfall? They all fall ill at night. Lord Botherington is suspicious of the graveyard and tells our heroes he's about to investigate the crypt, but there's a place he does not dare go. The Necropolis. Lord Botherington tells our heroes that the Necropolis has been sealed for centuries. It was built after an ancient war, and, well, it stood sealed ever since. As our heroes venture into the Necropolis, they enter a wide hallway lined with pillars and writing on the walls. If they take the time to translate the writing, it tells of a great battle against the forces of darkness and death itself. A body lies propped up in a tomb near the end of the corridor as it opens up into a T-shape beyond which are more doors and more bodies. Before then, however, next to some crumbled pillars are a couple of doors. Heaving the stone door open, the party adventure into the room. Another tomb and more story. It tells of a battle in which great heroes died, and they're buried in this room. A fountain continually pours clean water into the floor where it dissipates. And at the end of the room, 3 graves, one of which lies open. The head of the woman buried in this tomb turns to face our heroes. Her flesh has withered away centuries ago. She is now just a skeleton, otherwise inanimate, except that her head turns to follow the heroes. Her dress is still pristine, a little dirty from the time it spent laying motionless in the dark. It appears to be the robe of a powerful magic user. If the heroes take the dress, she doesn't resist them. She simply lies back down in her tomb. In the others, if the heroes remove the lids, are 2 warriors. Again, their skeletal remains. They're not animate like the woman, but their armour still remains. It looks, once more, pristine and engraved in symbols. These are suits of magical armour. Through the other door, if the heroes care to venture there, is another tomb. And another fountain pouring water, only this fountain pours dirty, foul, decrepit water. It smells disgusting and rancid. At the end of the room are 5 graves, and if their lids are removed, inside are the bodies of generals of an army, but their armour predates the armour on the other side by centuries. Their clothes withered and tattered, the fabric breaking as it's touched. They're completely inanimate, but the bones, they look older, and many of them are chipped and damaged. If the heroes read the story on the wall, they'll learn that these were the generals of the enemy army. They were buried here too, given respect in their death. Returning to the entrance corridor, the 2 doors at the far end, one is in a different style, and it refuses to budge no matter how hard they try, but the other will open. It's stiff, but with some effort, they can push the block free. The writing on the wall here says, "The family of the dead keep the seal shut." And in the floor, a plinth, a tribute to those buried within the floor, whose magical energy channels into an ancient glyph of arcane power. It glimmers only ever so slightly, like whatever magic fuels it is run loose. There's not much energy left here now. As our heroes proceed onwards, there's another plinth in the floor. It reads, "Beyond here are buried the 4 nights of dread. The way is sealed until they are needed once more. And as the heroes approach, the door opens by itself. In the corridor beyond, stacks of gold and trinkets and treasure, and the decayed remains of offerings. As our heroes come round the corner, buried in the floor are 2 paupers, destined to be servants to the 4 Knights of Dread, buried in the room beyond. As our heroes enter, the 4 Knights of Dread are rising up, a human, an elf, a dwarf, and something else, something ethereal. A creature from another plane, perhaps? The Knights of Dread sprint with a celerity that betrays their undead nature, pushing past the heroes, and they arrive at the sealed door. Once there, they begin uttering enchantments. If our heroes interfere, they'll defend themselves, sure. But as their enchantments continue, the door bursts open. And they rush forward. To be met by a scene of rubble. Statues of old kings guard what was once a wall and is now molten slag. Graves of dead warriors bashed from the eruption of the wall, cracked and broken. And beyond, a sea of skulls, trailing endlessly into the darkness beyond vision. The sea of skulls has waves and moves like it's water. The bones here are not just human. All manner of beast lies buried here. Who disturbs my realm? Emerging from the skulls like a giant standing up in water, a mighty Dracolich. Have the Dread Knights come to interfere with my plans to rise again? It has been 1,000 years since our last conflict, and in those 1,000 years I have prepared. Arise, arise, my subjects, from your slumber. Arise. Ha ha ha. You cannot stop me, Dread Knights. If our heroes have any sense, they'll run and leave the Dread Knights to fend off the undead horde. But as they do so, every body they disturbed has arisen. Every time the rogue took their coins for the ferryman, those bodies now rise up and block the hero's return and their fight to the exit. As our heroes make their escape, the dead, recently deceased from the plague, also begin to rise, and even the statues become animate. After dispatching the undead in the graveyard, our heroes seal the door shut for as long as they can. It's Lord Botherington. He's not emerged from the crypt. As our heroes venture into the crypt, they discover that Lord Botherington is not what he appeared to be. Ha ha ha, you fools. This was all my doing, and the ritual is complete. Death himself has risen. Lord Botherington, it transpires, is a vampire and has been for several decades. Where better to have made my plan to dominate the world than with the city of death, the village you call Throne Reach. A loud crashing can be heard against the tomb's door, and eventually the Dracolich emerges, his minions taken care of by the Knights of Dread, but the Dracolich himself, Death, emerges to conquer the world. For me, it's important that a village has a story and a history to it, and oftentimes when you're coming up with these histories, you make the adventure yourself. So when you put your village down on the map, think about why it's there, what was there years ago, and give it some life. This is a village of 4 buildings. We didn't even talk about one of them over there in the corner, but we gave it these ruined buildings that were a sign of it once being a much larger settlement, and then that led into the story of, okay, maybe there was a war in the past, so let's give it a big graveyard, and from the big graveyard came the idea from the Necropolis. And this is the heart of storytelling. It's not just a village, it's not just a city, it's not just a town, it's a history and a people and a culture. So thank you for watching Pair of Geeks. I hope you've enjoyed the video and taken inspiration from it, maybe some ideas you can use in your own games. Bye-bye. Oh, and please subscribe.